begin today the Gemara on Daf Kuf Ayin Amud Beis at the Mishnah. Dr. Heilige Mishnah, Mi Shapara Miktsas Chayvai. One that paid up part of his loan. So let's say the loan was $1,000 and he paid up $500. Now, what's going to be here? The lender has a document that says that he owes $1,000. What do you do with that document?
Can he just put down there -5?
So let's see. Rabbi Yehuda says, Yachlif. So you switch the document. That original document you tear up, you're going to write -5, so he'll tear off that -5. You already had before in the Gemara that we're always concerned that he could play around or erase. So you tear up the original document and you switch it with a new one. Rabbi Yasi says, Yichtef Shover. That what happens is the lender gives the borrower a receipt that he paid 500, and in the future, if he wants to collect, so he'll have the receipt that 500 was paid. But Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's not right to do this, because Nimtzot comes out that that the borrower always has to protect this receipt from mice or from whatever, that he should always have that proof. So why put that burden on him that he should always have to protect it? Amalei Rabbi Yossi, so Rabbi Yossi says, Kach yafaloi. This is the right thing. This is the right thing for the lender, because the lender did him a favor and lent him money. So the lender is the one that should have the upper hand over here, and therefore it's the right thing that he could say, I'm just giving you a receipt. And we're not going to take away the power of the lender that he can keep his original document. And what this means is, based on what the Rashbam here says, the Mefarshim say that what this does is to the borrower is it just puts pressure on him to pay up quicker, because he knows he has the receipt, but he might lose the receipt, and he has a shtar that says that I still owe him $1,000. So he doesn't want to get into any problems. It only puts more pressure on him to pay up quicker, and this is exactly what the lender wants here. And we grant him his wish, because he's the one that lent the money, and therefore he has the upper hand, instead of saying to the lender that we're going to tear up this shtar and we're going to write up a new shtar.
Why are you worried more about that he's going to lose his shtar and he's not going to, but the borrower, the lender...
Okay, the Gemara will discuss it. But here the point is that the lender has the upper hand in this case. The Gemara will explain more. We'll see. So the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna said, the name of Rav regarding this machlokes here, that Rav said, Ein aloche loik Rabbi Yehuda v'loik Rabbi Yossi. We don't paskin not like Rabbi Yehuda's opinion and not like Rabbi Yossi's opinion. Okay, now as you'll see here, we don't paskin like the Mishnah who was Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi says you write a receipt. So Rav says we definitely don't write any receipt. We're going to tear up the original shtar and write a second one. But even when we tear up the original shtar and write a second one, like Rabbi Yehuda said, we don't do it the way Rabbi Yehuda said it. Why? Because Rabbi Yehuda in the Mishnah says, who's the one that writes up a new shtar? The Eidim themselves. The person, between themselves, they can tear up the original shtar and write another shtar for the new amount that's owed now. So what Rav says is that no, Elo Bezdin Mekaran Ashtar. Bezdin is the one. If you want to write up a new shtar, you're going to have to go to Bezdin, and they're going to tear up the original shtar, V'kaisam lo shtar acher, and then they're going to write a new shtar, Mizman Rishon, from the first date. So these words, Mizman Rishon, this is the key of what the Gemara is saying here. Because what Rav is saying is, if you're going to write up a shtar, so once you tear the original shtar, what that means is that the original shibud, the lien that there is from the date originally in that shtar is gone, because it's torn up already. You're writing a new shtar. When you write a new shtar today, you're going to have to write the date of today. And therefore your rights of collecting this new amount of this loan will only be with today's date. So if you want to write a new shtar with the original date, you're going to have to go to Bezdin for that. Only Bezdin has the power. The Rashbam later here says in the Sugya, Hefke, Bezdin, Hefker, they have the power to write a shtar with today's date, but with the original loan from the first shtar. The Eidim themselves, so the person, the borrower and lender themselves cannot write up a new shtar with the original date.
Why not? That's what actually happened.
No, but that shtar was torn. See, what Rav holds is, once part of it is paid and you're tearing up that shtar, tearing up the shtar means that you're getting rid of that shibud. You're writing up a new shtar. Once you write up a new shtar, it's like the shibud starts from now. So you would have to write a new date from today. Amalei Rav Nachman Rav Huna. Rav Nachman asks Rav Huna about this. Amalei Rav Yimri Barav Rav Huna. Ishmiele Rav Ha Braise. If Rav would have heard what it says clearly in this Braise, the Tanya that we learned in the Braise, that it says Eidim Mekaran Ashtar, that the Eidim themselves, they can tear their original document that half of it was paid up already, and they themselves can go and write a new shtar from the original date. You don't have to go to Bezdin to do this. So have a hadebe. So Rav would have retracted from his opinion. Amalei, so Rav Huna said, actually no, Shmi'alei. Rav heard from this Braisa, and he heard that this is what Rav Yehuda said, but v'lo hadebe. Rav still did not retract from his opinion. Here the Rashbam brings that this is what Gemara says sometimes about Rav, that Rav Tanahu Upolik, even though usually Rav is considered to be from the generation of the Amoraim that did not argue on the Tanoim, but Rav was actually a student of Rebbe. He was in that generation which was sort of in between the Tanoim and Amoraim. So sometimes Rav would argue on things that the Tanoim said, and this is one case. Rav knew what so Rav heard what Rabbi Yehuda said, what Rabbi Yossi said, but he still disagreed. And the Gemara explains why is this? Because because it's understood the Bezdin, if you're going to go now to the Bezdin, alimi la'afkuim emayna. Bezdin has the power to take out money from someone even though it's really not justified. And as I explained before, they want to write this shtar, a new shtar today with the earlier date. So Bezdin can do that. Ella Edim, however, the witnesses, they themselves to go and write a new document with the first date. Also shlichusan, they already did their shlichus in the beginning when they wrote the original document with that date. So now chayzer vayisen shlichusan, they're going to go again and be empowered to do that shlichus, to write a new document with the original date. They don't have the power to do that. So therefore, you have to go to the Bezdin. That's Rav's opinion here. Okay, so as I explained, the basis of this whole thing is that when you tear the original shtar and you write up a new shtar, it's like the loan is starting again from scratch now. It's like a new shibud. So therefore, you would have to write a new date today. But now the Gemara asks on that entire premise. But v'loi, does Rav not hold that the Eidim themselves could write up a new document with the original date? Eidim can write even 10 times. They can replace a document for one property. If a person has a property and he had a document, the deed, and it was lost, and now he wants to write another one, and he can write it with the original date, even 10 times they could write it for him. They don't have to go to the Bezdin. The Eidim themselves can replace that document for him. This is something we discussed actually in the Gemara before when you lose a document. And there the Gemara says that there's a problem that you don't do it because if you give a person a second document, then he could utilize it to then go and confiscate properties and so on. So the Rishonim over here say that in this case, it's talking about a scenario where we have Eidim that he actually lost his shtar somewhere in the street or in the water where we know he doesn't have another shtar. So if it's a case where we know for a fact that doesn't have that original stars. But the point is, here we see Eidim themselves could replace the shtar with the original date, and you don't have to go back to Bezdin. So basically, what you see over here is that Rav really holds that when you're writing a new document on the same sale or on the same loan, it's not the pshat that now the original shibud, the original loan is done, and it's like you're starting again from scratch, and therefore you would have to write today's date. Since you're just replacing the previous sale or the document of the previous sale or the original loan, so it's like the previous shibud, the lien from the beginning is still in effect. So there's no problem to write the original date. Even the Eidim can do that. You don't need the power of Bezdin. So the Gemara gives two answers to this. So this is a contradiction here in Rav's opinion. Rav Yosef answers, Bishtar Matana. That over here, we're talking about a shtar that cannot be used at all to go and then based on the earlier date to confiscate properties from any buyer from that earlier date. Why? Because this is a shtar where a person has that this property was gifted to him. The rule by any property that you get as a gift is the one that gives a gift does not take any responsibility to reimburse it if it gets confiscated from you. A gift is, I'm giving you now this gift, but if it gets confiscated from you, then too bad. So therefore, by a shtar matana, the date will not make any difference. Or a similar answer, Rabba says, B'shtar she'em b'achrayis. By a shtar that it's clearly written in the shtar that the seller is not taking any responsibility if it gets confiscated from him to reimburse him. So in such a shtar, the date doesn't matter either. So that's when Rav said you can replace the shtar. Eidim themselves can replace the shtar. But in a case where the date will matter, by a loan or by a sale, so then you have to go to the Bezdin to replace the shtar.
Why will the date matter by a loan?
Because if you have an earlier date, so then you can go and confiscate from the buyers of the borrower based on that earlier date, not only from the later date.
So what? In this kind of a case, so what? The first shtar was there, the second shtar was there.
But now that you're tearing the first star, Rav holds once you tear the first star, the original loan, which was $1,000, which was on whatever date, is over. It's like you're starting a new loan. It's a new shibud that begins from today. So you could only collect from any buyers that follow.
Why do you hold that way in such a case?
Because once you tear up, it's not a milval peh. It's a milva b'shtar. It's the shtar that defines what the shibud is. So once you tear up the shtar from the original loan, that's what the deal now is. That original loan is over, and we're tearing that up. And now we're writing a new shtar. It's a new shibud. So therefore, it begins from today. So if you want to keep the original date, that's only with the power of Bezdin. That you need the koyach of Bezdin, Hefke. They're able to keep the original date.
Even though I didn't pay you.
He didn't pay half. It's a new shtar though. Okay, now the Gemara brings the Braisa. We quoted before from a Braisa, just what Rabbi Yehuda said. The Gemara brings here the whole Braisa. My Braisa. What's the Braisa that we quoted before? The Tanya, so the Braisa said, so this person is collecting from someone, he owes him 1,000 zuz. And he paid half, he paid 500. So what happens? Eidim mekaran is a star. So now the Eidim themselves, they can go and tear the original star. And they write a second document, and they can write even with the original date. David Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion, like we learned in the Mishnah as well. Rabbi Yosi says, star zeh, this original star, you can leave it by the lender, and then you write a receipt for the borrower that he paid half of the loan. And Rabbi Yossi explains, there's two reasons why I say that it's a better idea that you should write a receipt for the borrower and not tear up the original star. One is because this will now force the borrower, it'll put him under pressure to pay up the loan, because as we learned before, he's concerned that he's going to lose that receipt, and he knows that the lender has a star with the full amount. So this is for the benefit of the lender, to force him to pay. Another reason is so like this, you leave the lender with the original star that has the earlier date, so he not can collect with the earlier date. But now the second reason, the Gemara asks right away, but for Rabbi Yehuda nami mizman rishon ka'amar. When Rabbi Yehuda says that you replace it with a second document, Rabbi Yehuda says you also write the original date on the second document. So what's the point that Rabbi Yossi is saying? That we want to keep the original document because we want to keep the original date. Even if you replace it, you're going to have the original date according to Rabbi Yehuda. So the Gemara answers that no, hachi ka'amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda. This is what Rabbi Yossi was saying to Rabbi Yehuda. If what you're saying, when you replace the document, according to your opinion, you're writing the original date, so then then the reason why I argue that it's a better idea to give a receipt is only one reason, just to put pressure on the borrower to pay up, because the original date is still there. If your opinion is that when you write a replacement document or another document of the new amount that you put the date from today, then the reason why I argue on you is for a second reason as well, because we want the lender to have the ability to collect the loan based on the earlier date. We learned in a Braisa, what happens if you have a star and there's a date written in it? It says in it, let's say Yutes Kislev, or the Kviyas of this year, Chof Kislev, it says in the star, and it turns out that date is b'Shabbos. It can't be that it was written on Shabbos. So what do we consider this date to be? When was it written? Or another example, Basara B'Tishrei. It ends up being on Asara B'Tishrei, which is on Yom Kippur. Now this can't really happen if they were writing the date with the Lashon Kodesh day, with the Yiddish date. No one would write a star for the 10th of Tishrei. They probably wrote the star September or October something. And the date that was written, they made a mistake. They didn't realize that date was actually Yom Kippur. But they wrote Pashat the wrong date by mistake. Or the same thing also regarding Shabbos. They wrote a date of the month and they didn't realize that it's on Shabbos. So what's the story with this star? Says the Gemara, said the Braisa, star mu'ocheru. This star, we assume that the date that was written is a wrong date, but it was actually a date that was written later than the time that it was written. And therefore, a star of a loan or of a sale that has in it a date that's later than the actual time of the loan, the star is actually kosher. The halacha, the Gemara is soon going to talk about this more, brings there's this Mishnah that says this, that any star of a loan that has a later date than when the loan actually happened is kosher. A star that has a date that's earlier than when the loan actually happened is pasul. So over here in this case, we're going to assume that it had a later date. Why do we assume this? Why don't we assume that it has or maybe an earlier date.
Right.
So the Rashbam over here brings from the Gemara and Sanhedrin that discusses this, and the point that the Gemara basically there says is that because you have a document that has witnesses and it seems to be a kosher document, in order to go and passel it, you have to have proof to passel a document. Otherwise, we assume that this document is kosher because it's a shtar shenechkra edusa bebezin. The Eidim were testified and their signatures were verified. So therefore, we assume it to be kosher, and the date on it just means that it was a later date.
And the borrower won't.
Again,
The borrower won't allow such a start.
he loses out. The lender is the one that loses out over here. No, who's one? Huh?
The borrower. If I borrow money from you on Yud
Yeah.
Tishrei, but you write your star for Hey Tishrei, that means you have money.
Oh, so that's if it's muktim, yeah.
Right,
If it's muktim,
that's
but if it's mu'ocher,
No,
so
okay,
then,
okay.
yeah. So if it's mu'ocher, then
the
there's,
borrower, right?
there's no problem of it because
Right.
it just the borrower gains out of this,
Right.
and if the lender is ready to write a
Well,
later
it's
date,
predated,
yeah.
then
Okay, yeah.
that's the
We
reason.
Gemara will still discuss about this, huh?
That's why predated is
Yeah.
possible.
So predated is possible, and if it's mu'ocher, it's going to be kosher. Now Rabbi Yosi paisel. Rabbi Yosi says that this will be possible. Amalei Rabbi Yehuda, but Rabbi Yehuda asks Rabbi Yosi, but v'halei ma'aseh bo lefanecha b'tzipairi. There was a story that came in front of you with such a kind of star in tzipairi v'chsharta, and you said that it is kosher. Amalei, so Rabbi Yosi says, K'shech sharti bozeh sharti. When I said it's kosher, it's only in this case, like what you just said here. If it's a star that's written and it has a date from Shabbos or from Yom Kippur, so I say that it's a later date. That's when I was machsher. So now the Gemara asks, so how do we explain here the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi? For Rabbi Yehuda nami bozeh ka'amar. Isn't Rabbi Yehuda also speaking about this case? We're talking about a case where the date is Shabbos or Yom Kippur, and he says that it's kosher, and on that Rabbi Yosi argued. Now Rabbi Yosi is saying, no, I actually say it's kosher. So what are they arguing about? So Amar Pedas explained their argument as follows. Hakayom Baidim, both Rabbi Yosi and Rabbi Yehuda would agree, She'im huskaknu lo einaseh shel shtar, that if it's a date and a star that you can clearly see that something is wrong with this date because it falls out on Shabbos or Yom Kippur. So then we assume that really the date in the star is incorrect and it was delayed from the actual time that the money was borrowed. And therefore, in such a case, it'll be kosher. As I mentioned before, I explained before, the Rashbam says that because when you have a star that the Eidim are interrogated and it's kosher, we assume that the star is kosher. There's two ways you can go. You could either assume that it's possible because it was predated, or you could assume that it was delayed. So we assume that it's kosher by a star. Okay, so in that case, when you can clearly see from the date of the star that something's wrong with this date, so then we assume that it was that the date was delayed from the actual time, and therefore it's going to be kosher. So when it's the argument here between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosi, regarding any star that has a later date on it, here there's an argument whether there's an issue with this. So as we said before, Rabbi Yehuda says a star that has a later date on it, there's no problem. Nothing can go wrong with writing a later date. But Rabbi Yosi actually holds that there is a problem. As the Gemara here explains, that Rabbi Yehuda l'taimei, Rabbi Yehuda follows his reasoning. Rabbi Yehuda says when a person pays up a loan or he pays up part of the loan, the borrower does not get a receipt. Instead, what happens? He takes back that document of the loan from the lender. So if so, nothing could go wrong with having a later date. You pay up the loan, you take back that document, and that's it. The lender could never use that document again to try to collect money from you. But for Rabbi Yosi, however, Rabbi Yosi, according to his reasoning, Rabbi Yosi, that it says that you do write a receipt for the borrower when he pays up the loan. So now, if you're going to have a star that has in it a later date, this could cause a very big problem. What's going to be the problem? What happens if the borrower pays up the loan before that date that there is on this document? That was a delayed date, and he paid up already. So now he gets a receipt for it. But the lender that has that document with a later date is going to come back to you later and say, here, you still owe me money. And you're going to say, what do you mean? I have a receipt. I paid you. You're going to say, the receipt? That was for a different loan. I lent you money again. And he has a later date that shows that he lent the money again. So it could be a big problem. So therefore, Rabbi Yosi actually holds you could never write a star with a later date. So the understanding of the Brisa before is in a case where you can clearly see in the date of the document that there's something wrong here, that this shtar has a later date in it because the date is Shabbos or Yom Kippur, so then we're not concerned about this problem. Because if you're going to show a receipt and he's going to show you this document with a later date, the Bezdin is going to say, wait a minute, the date in this shtar is not, something's wrong over here. So they're not going to allow him to come and claim that there was a new loan here. But if it's a shtar that has a later date and you can't see that it's a later date, so in such a case, going to be a problem. He might collect a second time. So therefore, it's in that case that Rabbi Yossi argues and says that it's possible. Now going back to Bechlal, this whole machlokes here about whether we write a receipt when the borrower pays or we just tear up the original shtar. So even according to Rabbi Yossi that says that you do write a receipt, when is that? If he paid up half of the loan. And now, so you can't tear up the shtar. We don't want to tear up the shtar because he still owes him some of the money. So it's in this case that Rabbi Yossi says that we give the borrower a receipt. Aval akule loy. But in a case where the borrower is coming to pay up the entire loan, here Rabbi Yossi would agree that we don't write a receipt. Which would then, what that would mean is that if the borrower is coming to pay up the money and the lender says, sorry, I don't have the document of the loan to give back to you. So then the borrower could say, I'm not paying you up until you give me back the document. And I'm not ready to accept any receipts. So he won't have to pay until the lender produces the document. But on this the Gemara asks, or the Gemara actually says, that this is not true. Now, even if the borrower is paying up the entire loan, the lender could say, I'm not giving you back the original document of the loan, I'm just giving you a receipt. And the Gemara brings a story. Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef was collecting money from Rababa, a loan. Now, Asal Kamei de Rab Chanina bar Papi. So they came in front of Rav Chanina bar Papi. We had the same two people that were doing business before. Also, Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef that was collecting from Rababa and the daf before. And there they went to Rav Yitzchak Nafche. Here this is a different loan apparently, and they came to Rav Chanina bar Papi. Amalei, so he says to him, Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef says to Rababa, Havli Zuzai, pay me the money. Amalei, so he says to him, Rababa says to him, Havli Shtarai, so give me back the document of the loan. And Eshkal Zuzach, and then you'll take your money. Amalei, so he says, Shtarach Irchasli, I lost your shtar. Echtav Loch Tavra, let me write for you a receipt. Amalei, so he said back to him, but Rav Shmuel Damri Tarvayu, Rav and Shmuel both paskin, they said, Ein Kais V'N Shaver. We don't write a receipt. We paskin like Rabbi Yehuda that says we don't write a receipt because this person is going to have to now protect his receipt from the mice, like it said in the Mishnah. So Omar, he said about this, you're quoting Rav and Shmuel that said this, Man Yavlon Ma'afrei de Rav and Shmuel, who can give us from the earth by the place of the burial of Rav and Shmuel that was so holy that Ramin Beinam will put it into our eyes. So in other words, he's saying true, that if the Rav and Shmuel said this, they're very great holy Amirayim, but Rabbi Yechanan v'ha Reish Lakish. But on the other hand, though, you have both Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish. They disagreed. The Amri Tarvaya, they both said Kais V'N Shaver, that you do write a receipt when you pay up a loan if the lender does not want to give back the document. And V'chein Asarav and Amar Rabbi also Rav said the name of Rabbi Kais V'N Shaver, that you do write a receipt. And the Gemara concludes and says that it's logical to accept this opinion that you write a receipt, and even regarding the payment of a full loan, if the lender says, I lost the shtar. And it's logical that we will write a receipt. Because if you're going to say that we don't write a receipt for the borrower, and then the borrower could say, I'm not paying up until I get back my shtar. So if the lender lost the shtar, he's not going to get paid. So what's going to happen? If the lender loses the document, so this person shall eat and rejoice and not have to pay up his loan. Why should he not have to pay up his loan? So therefore, in such a case, true, there could be a certain level of negligence on behalf of the lender that he lost the document, but the fact that he doesn't have the document now, it's not enough of a reason that he shouldn't get his loan paid up. So therefore, even in such a case, we do write him a receipt, and he has to pay. Askafla Abaye, but Abaye says, but you could also argue in the reverse and say, Ve'elamai kais v'shoiver, so you write up a receipt for the borrower. So now what happens if Avad Shoiver Shulzeh? If the borrower that got a receipt and now he lost his receipt, so now the lender will eat and rejoice, because now the lender that finds out that the borrower lost his document will take advantage and come and collect the loan a second time. So it goes both ways. So Rava says, in such a yes, We say this because Eved Loive Leishmalva. Between the two of them, you have the Loive, the borrower, and you have the lender. The lender is considered to be like the slave of the lender because he's the one that got the favor for him. He lent him money. So in this case, we say that the lender has the upper hand. The Rishonim actually explained that it's not only this pasuk that Gemara quotes here, that we always say that the loive has the lower hand and the lender has the upper hand because he lent him the money. It's more than that. When you look over here at these two concerns, on one hand we say, should the borrower not have to pay up his loan just because the lender lost his receipt? And on the other hand we say, and what's if the borrower is going to lose, the lender lost his document? And what happens if the borrower loses his receipt? Now the lender can collect from him a second time. These two things, if you think about it, it's very simple. Over here, he's not paying up his loan. Over here, there's a concern. Maybe he might lose his receipt, and maybe he might take advantage of it. That's only a maybe. But over here, how could you say that he shouldn't pay up his loan? So therefore, he has to pay up the loan, and he gets a receipt for this. Okay, now here, the Gemara brings the source of what was mentioned before, the difference between a shtar that has predated or that the date is post-dated. So, Tanan Hassam, we learned in the Mishnah that says, Shtari Chayva Mukdamin, those documents that are predated, psulin, are going to be puzzle, because this gives the borrower the power to collect from those properties that were even from that original date, which really are not, there's no lien on them, so it's puzzle. But the shtar that's post-dated, so that takes away from the power of the borrower, and he's agreeing to this, so then it's going to be kosher. So Rav Amnunah said about this Mishnah, what this Mishnah says is only true about documents, the date on documents of loans. But if it's a shtar for the sale of a property, then even if you bought the property, let's say in Chodesh Nisan, and you're writing the date to be in Chodesh Tishrei, it'll also be puzzle. What's the reason for this? My time, Zimnin the Mazmulei Arab Nisan. Because what happens if you bought the property in Nisan? And the cost of labor Tishrei, you write post-dated, you write that you bought it in Tishrei, but now in between, the 6 months in between, what happens is, let's say in between, the seller now has money available, and he wants to buy back now this he buys back this property from the buyer. Now v'chimati Tishrei, then when Tishrei comes around, mapikle, now the buyer that has that shtar of the sale that has in it the date of Tishrei takes out that shtar, and he tells him, I bought it back from you a second time. So therefore you can't post-date a document for the sale of a property. So the Gemara asks, but if this is your concern, so then shtari alva nami. The same thing could happen regarding a document of a loan, and this is the point that we spoke about before, according to the opinion that you write a receipt. The same thing could happen. Zimnin the Yazav ben Nisan, a person borrowed money in Nisan time, because of Leishtara b'Tishrei, and the date is post-dated that he borrowed the money only in Tishrei. Now, Misraimi lezuzi beini beini, the borrower had money in between Nisan and Tishrei, and he already paid up the loan. And v'amale havli ishtaroi, and the borrower said, give me back the document so you don't collect the second time. V'amale, and the lender said, irchasli, I lost the document. And because of leitavre, the lender gave the borrower a receipt, and then v'chizmati zimne, but then later when Tishrei comes, mapikle, he'll take out that document of the loan that he still has, and v'amalei hani hashtu the yasus minoi, and he's going to say this is a new loan. You have a receipt, but this is a new loan with a new date that I lent you money again. So it can still be a problem when you write a later date, post-dated in a document of a loan. That says the Gemara, Kasava, we must say that Rav Amnunah holds ein kais v'shover. You don't write a receipt. That when you pay a loan, you could demand from the lender, give me back the document. So therefore, this is not a concern. You take away that document from him. Okay, now the Gemara concludes regarding how we do this. Bisman hazeh, do we? Amalei Rav Yemer le Rav Kahana. Rav Yemer said to Rav Kahana, Amalei Rav Yimri medifti le Rav Kahana. V'hidna. Now in our times, the kasvin and shtarim mochari, we write documents of loans, and we write it even post-dated. And also the kasvin and tavra. When you come to collect the loan, you don't necessarily give back the document to the borrower. You write him a receipt. Why are we doing this? We just explained that can cause a problem to now the lender will take out that document a second time later on. So he explained to him, Rav Kahana said, Basa the Amaluhud of Abba Lesafre, after Rav Abba said to his scribe that what we do is as follows. When you write a shtar that's going to be post-dated, you should make it clear in the document that it's post-dated. And you should write, Shtara dinon This document, loy bezimne kasvine, was not written on the date that it says in it. El achrenuhu v'kasvanuhu. We wrote it post-dated. So you clarify that into the shtar itself. So in such a case, there's no concern that he might take out the shtar a second time later to try to collect a second time, because the Bezdin will see right away that the date in it is really was post-dated. But the Gemara presses on further and says, Rav Ashi asked Rav Kahana, but today we don't even do this. When we write a shtar post-dated, we don't clarify in the shtar that it was post-dated. So how do we do this? So the Gemara says, because there's something else. Because now Rav Safra would tell his scribe when he would write a receipt, ki kasvisu hani tavri, when you write a receipt, if you know what the date of that original document of the loan is, so kisfu, write into the receipt that this is a receipt for this document that has this and this date in it. So now you can't use ever that shtar again to collect a second time, because it's written in the receipt for what document it is. Eloi, and if there's no date of it, if you don't know what the date is, you don't know what the date of that original document is, then kisvu stame, then write a receipt and don't write a date on the receipt. So whenever the lender would want to come and take out a second shtar that you borrowed money again, you'll have a receipt that you paid, and the receipt doesn't have the date that you paid it 2 months ago. You can say, I have a receipt that I paid you today. So therefore, it's not a concern. The chaleim is the nafik. Anytime the lender will want to take out a shtar to collect a second time, lare. Lare means you can weaken it. You can weaken that shtar by saying, I have a receipt that I paid you now. But the Gemara presses on further. Ravina said to Rav Ashi, Rav Ashi asked Rav Kahana, but now the leikav dinanachi. We don't do this. We don't write in the receipt the way we just said that you should write. So we do write the date in the receipt, and it makes this problem that it's possible for the lender to collect the second time. So why are we doing this? So he answered him and said, look, Rabbanan tekini. Rabbanan instituted exactly how it should be done in order that the borrower should not be cheated a second time. Man David, so whoever's going to follow what the Rabbanan said to do, so you won't be cheated. Man of it, if the borrower is not following what the Rabbanan said to do, so he would have to have he's bringing the loss upon himself. So he could end up being cheated. We have an eitzah, what could be done? You can write the receipt without a date, so you'll always be able to present it, or you can write the date of that original document of the loan in it, so it'll be clear what exactly it is that you paid. If you're not going to do it, so then that's your own negligence, and therefore we're not concerned about that.
You do that